morning, everyone. We love the music too. It always makes us feel so fancy when we have that music playing. Not to give it away, sorry, of course we're very fancy here. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our 5th annual January Strategy Summit. This is day 2, so thank you for folks who are joining us again, and welcome to folks who are joining us today. We're really excited. We're really over the moon to have this event going on right now. So I'm the program director for Reimagine Appalachia, and I'm going to walk you through some of the basics as we get day 2 started. So first, thanks to our incredible staff, the planning team that met weekly in the run up to the event, and especially the lovely Molly Updegrove, whom you may have received an email from, for the tremendous efforts of pulling this event together. We have 18 sessions, 60 speakers, more than 600, actually nearly 700 people, I can say that now, registered for the event. So a massive thank you to everybody. It really does take a village, and we are so grateful to be in such a wonderful community. Speaking of our wonderful community, I want to acknowledge all of the hard things that are happening in the world, all of the weights that we carry with us as we move through our work, and also to acknowledge that in times of grief and trauma and loss, that studies have shown that it is healing and healthy to come together as a community to do good, concrete, productive work. And so our hope today and going forward to 2025 is that we Reimagine can be a resource and to help help the growth of that productive world for when we feel like we're holding the weight of the world, that our shared burdens make that weight a little bit lighter when we do it together. So today is January 15th, which is Martin Luther King's birthday. We celebrate the holiday on the Monday, January 20th, but today is his actual birthday, which I know in particular because my 10-year-old daughter's birthday is also today. She's 10, but I have her little, I know it's going to be backwards, but I have her little notebook on my desk, and it has the quote. She bought this with her own money. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. That's a Martin Luther King quote. So one of the things I say a lot is that we often feel like we're building the plane while flying it, but I'm going to lean into Dr. King's metaphor today, and I'm going to say we're so pleased that you're with us today building the staircase together as we climb and lifting one another up to the next level. And then yesterday, I started the day with a little poem, and I'm going back to my English major roots, and I'm going to give you all a reading assignment, some homework. And there is a quote from the letter from a Birmingham jail by Dr. King, and a link to a place where you can read that in full on either today and on not during the event as my little English teacher, but in honor of his birthday or in honor of the holiday celebrating his good works. But in particular, that's about connectivity and the connections we have. Yes, so thank you, Molly. We're moving on to the sponsors. Speaking of connectivity and working together to build that staircase that we can't necessarily see where it goes, but we know we're going to build it. Thanks to our incredible sponsors who've helped make this event possible and make our work possible every day. And a particular thanks to the Benedum Foundation, which is an organization that has been working for over 80 years with a particular focus on education, economic development, health, and community development. So next is the agenda for day 2. Let's pop that, thank you. And so as you can see there, that was the agenda for day 1. Day 2, my fault. I should have fixed that, Molly. That's on me. So we're going to open with a keynote panel, which I'm currently taking you away from, and then we'll have a short break. And then after the break, we'll move into our first session of breakout sessions. To join those, you just stick around here and we'll give you the instructions at that time to move into those. Nothing special is needed. And then the second set of breakout sessions will immediately follow the first. You can view the descriptions of those breakout sessions in our agenda, so you which you can get with the QR code or in the link in the chat, which will be shared a few times. And then just a little bit more housekeeping notes. This event is being live streamed to Facebook. We have notes and recordings of all the sessions on our website after the event, as well as all registrants are always emailed those recordings and presentations after the event. So if you're here, that means you registered. And if you registered with your correct email, then you'll get an email with that information. If you would like to enable closed captioning, you can look to the bottom of your screen. You'll either see the word captions or 3 little dots that will allow you to choose the language to have your captions in case people like me are talking too fast and you're having a hard time following along. Hopefully those captions can help. And for those who are just joining us, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you haven't already. So what are we doing here today? Reimagine Appalachia is a coalition that was born from the recognition that the economy does not work for most people and places. And our hope is to bring together stakeholders to strategize on how we can build that staircase to an economy that's good for workers, communities, and the environment. And one of our goals with this summit is to help create our strategy for the year. And so we're really hopeful that you all will be engaged and active in the chat. So I'm actually going to, oh, okay. So we have a poll up. So let's answer that really quick. So this is practice for later today. And a lot of our breakouts are going to have these polls. So let's see if we can get y'all going in there. Let's hear a little bit from you before I hand it over to Joanne to start the panel. So if you click that link in the poll, your answer will actually show up on the screen. So folks can take a second, click that link, and I'll drop the link again if folks need it. And thanks everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat. We love to see an interactive chat. Please stay on mute if you're not one of our speakers. We will ask folks we'd love to hear your questions. We love to see networking, but please hold that in the chat until we're in the breakout rooms. And we do have the 2 hours of breakouts to enable folks to be a little bit more in contact with one another. But please make use of the chat, share about your work, introduce yourselves, network, etc. Great to see those answers coming in. And as those are rolling in, I'm going to hand it over to Joanne to get us started with the panel.
Thank you so much, Dana. And good morning, everyone. As Dana mentioned, I'm Joanne Kilgour, Executive Director of the Ohio River Valley Institute. And I'm just so pleased to be here with you all for day 2 of the Reimagine Appalachia Strategy Summit. Yesterday was such a productive and energizing day that I'm thrilled that we're here building on that momentum. So this morning's panel is titled, What's Next for Appalachia's Clean Economy? And it's an opportunity for us to hear from experts working across economic development, environmental justice, and labor about pathways for continued work as a collective to build on and secure new wins that support stakeholders across all those sectors. So, although there's no denying that the federal landscape will change significantly, we do have some key successes to build on, and we'll still have the opportunity to see those through toward implementation and to make sure that we're maximizing their impact for Appalachian communities. So just a sample of what some of those opportunities are, a nearly $400 million grant program for industrial decarbonization in Pennsylvania, the Reducing Industrial Sector's Emissions in PA or RISE PA program that will deliver real economic and environmental benefits to Pennsylvania residents and position the Commonwealth as a national climate leader. More than $156 million for each of Pennsylvania and Ohio, as well as more than $62 million for Kentucky to implement residential solar programs for low to moderate income households through the Solar for All program, on top of additional large-scale multi-state opportunities through Solar for All. As we heard yesterday, the $500 million award to Appalachian Community Capital through EPA's Clean Communities Investment Accelerator to support the Green Bank for Rural America, and funding to support Investing in America workforce hubs, creating pathways to careers in clean energy and infrastructure so union workers can access good jobs created by private and public sector investments in the region spurred through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. To jumpstart this conversation, we're joined by a wonderful group of panelists, including Mustafa Santiago Ali, an executive vice president at the National Wildlife Federation, Angela Ferrito, the president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, Jacob Hanna, the chief executive officer of the Coalfield Development Corporation, and Camilla Taylor, the executive director of the American Sustainable Business Network. I want to extend my deep appreciation to the team at Reimagine Appalachia for bringing us together today, and for each of our panelists for taking the time to share their expertise. We'll hear remarks from each panelist, and then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for a facilitated question and answer session. So as you have questions that come up for our panel, please drop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of our prepared remarks. So with that, it's my absolute honor to welcome Mustafa Santiago Ali.
Thank you, Joanne. It's an honor and a blessing to be here with everyone. I am a fourth generation Appalachian, third generation union member, and proud to be here with everyone today. I want to thank everyone for also honoring Dr. King and the work that he's has done over the years, even though his spirit still lives with us. It's still very apropos when he said that it's always the right time to do what's right. And I know the folks who are here on the screen, the folks who are participating today have been dedicating their lives for decades to make sure that real change is happening back home. I'm also reminded of the words of James Baldwin. Some of you may be familiar with James Baldwin and the amazing writer and activist that he was, when he said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you don't see. Sometimes we don't see the successes that have gone on, especially in locations that are often unseen and unheard. So we want to make sure that we are honoring that we made a lot of progress on climate and clean energy, environment, economic justice over the last 4 years. The momentum here that will continue. We know that it doesn't stop. The work never stops, but also the innovation has to never stop to be able to make the change that's necessary to continue on. There are federal dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that are going to continue to flow. And I know both yesterday and today, folks have been sharing with you this amazing sets of work that is going on, the innovation that exists in West Virginia and Tennessee and Western Pennsylvania and Southern Ohio and Tennessee and a number of places across the region that are just doing amazing work. And some of those examples are like from the EPA Community Change Grants. That first tranche of funding that came out, $325 million that was announced back in November, supports projects to reduce pollution, increase community climate resilience, and build capacity. And also to be able to think innovatively about how do we make sure we're moving forward on a clean economy in areas that are often not thought about, but are incredibly impacted. We want to make sure that we're also calling out, some of the folks that have been able to just do amazing things. Some of those awardees like the Pittsburgh Conservation Corps and Power Corps PHL, receive that $14 million. Workforce programs are incredibly important. We know in the places where we come from, in many instances, industries left decades ago, and folks have been looking for an opportunity to be able to provide for their families, put food on the table, keep the lights on, make sure that real change is happening, save a few dollars to be able to send their kids to college. And these types of opportunities help us to either reinforce work that's already going on or to build out new sets of opportunities that are there. We know, of course, also that Solar for All and the $7 billion and the 60 grants that came through that program are also incredibly important because the new clean economy plays a critical role. We see all the crises that are going on, and we know that we can play a role once again in helping to address the climate crisis, but at the same time, make sure that we are creating these new sets of economic opportunities that folks so desperately need. We look at the opportunities that have been out there around the Tic-Tac grants, supporting communities, helping to create the training that's necessary, helping to address environmental and energy justice issues, making sure that we can help communities to become healthier and greener. These are things that we are brought up with. And in the lessons that our grandmothers and great grandmothers taught us. My grandmother always said, we fixing to do some work. For those who are really from back home, you'll understand that word fixing and all that goes into those few sets of letters. And that's the work that has happened and will continue to happen. And we know that we also have to continue to make sure that we are supporting our states, our nonprofits, our local governments who are on the ground doing the work, understand the dynamics that are there, understanding both the hurdles that are there, but also the huge sets of opportunities that exist in front of us. But we have to have an honest conversation also. And I know I'm short on time. I was raised in a family of Baptist and Pentecostal ministers, so y'all gonna have to hold on with me for one quick second here. We know that we've got some challenges that are ahead of us, right? We need to be honest about that, but we also understand through organizing, through also taking a look at what are the sets of priorities that we can find alignment with a new administration, whether it's a federal administration or state administration, is incredibly important because we have to continue to put wins on the board. Those wins help people to live healthier lives, to have a stronger economic base underneath of them. But we also got to live up to our values. And we've got to make sure that when those values are not being honored, that we're speaking out. But we are also highlighting for folks how real change happens. Those narratives are incredibly important. John Lewis was one of my mentors. And he said it is about two things. It is about the work, but it is also about the narrative. It is about those stories about how change is actually happening and making sure that we are bringing those forward. We've got to make sure that we are also fighting to honor science. Science is incredibly important. Science should be unbiased. Science should tell us exactly where we are and where we need to go to be able to be in a better place. And we have to make sure that we are also honoring and fighting for environmental justice. Understanding that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and lower wealth white communities in Appalachia and beyond are at risk. Let me say that again, are at risk. If some of the things that have been shared from the incoming administration are how they truly are going to move forward, and we have to make sure that we are protecting those communities and also making sure that we are looking for the opportunities to be able to lift them up. Now, President-elect Trump has said that he wants the United States to have the cleanest air and the cleanest water on the planet. Now, if that is true, then we also need to have the cleanest businesses on the planet. We need to ensure communities without clean air and water, especially those suffering disproportionate environmental burdens from years of disinvestment and legacy pollution, get the funding and support that they need. And where better to do that than in Appalachia? So with that being said, Joanne, I'm going to pass it back to you, and I'm looking forward to our Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. We really appreciate your insights. And next we'll hear from Angela Ferrito. Angela, welcome.
Thank you, Joanne. Thanks for having me. And I'll just real quickly just note on Mustafa's comment and just say that I would also add that we would need to have some collaboration across the entire supply chain if we are going to have the cleanest air and water in the world. And it could be to the point of what I'm going to talk about a little bit here about manufacturing from the ground up and the workforce. So, I want to take a few minutes. I've been asked to spend a few minutes to talk about labor's standpoint on the work ahead of us and how we can build a more sustainable, equitable economy that we can all work together to make sure that these new clean manufacturing jobs are good union jobs. And the need to create that supply chain to strengthen manufacturing from the ground up and how we can continue to build a more inclusive workforce. So ensuring that green manufacturing practices support good union jobs is a key goal for labor and for many policymakers who seek to balance that sustainability with workers' rights. And we need collaboration to align the goals of environmental responsibility and labor justice. And we're doing that by focusing on shared values, on policies and practices, and really taking the time. We're taking the time to establish shared goals for sustainability and labor standards, collaborating on green manufacturing initiatives, strengthening collective bargaining agreements, ensuring workplace health and safety standards are in place and adhered to. And we're leveraging government support We in the labor movement have been joining together with faith leaders, student activists, academia, environmental groups, and business leaders to advocate for policies that promote both sustainable manufacturing practices and labor rights. And all the while, we're focused on building resilient communities. You know, as green manufacturing grows, one of the long-term goals that we have is to ensure that it contributes positively to the local communities. By ensuring that clean manufacturing jobs are good union jobs, we're going to help to strengthen those local economies. We're going to improve job quality and make positive impacts on public health and the environment. And investing in the clean manufacturing technologies can be part of a broader strategy, really, for economic development in regions that need job creation, particularly the regions that, you know, have been traditionally reliant on jobs in the fossil fuel industry. Green manufacturing is sort of this beacon of hope that, you know, can provide some long-term, good-paying union jobs in some of these communities that have been left behind by the loss of the fossil fuel industry jobs. And so we're really, you know, focused on working together to create this shared vision for green manufacturing that balances environmental sustainability with those fair labor practices. We know that this has to be a collaboration between employers, unions, government bodies, and community organizations. And that's really the key to ensuring that this transition to a green economy provides equitable opportunities for workers, strengthens the quality of those jobs, and contributes to creating long-term good well-being for people and the planet, right? So we're working towards strengthening green manufacturing here in Pennsylvania while ensuring those jobs are being created and turned into good union jobs. We're constantly evaluating the changes that can be expected, both in the manufacturing sector and within the labor market. And some of the conversations that we're having involve shifts in the technology. We're talking about the policies behind the work, behind the funding, job structures, and business models. We have a really acute focus on job creation that's happening in these sustainable sectors. You know, we are already seeing this rise of green collar jobs, and it's taking and combining these skilled labor jobs with environmentally friendly practices. And the roles range from, you know, renewable energy technicians to energy auditors to workers specializing in sustainable manufacturing methods. And with the rise of these new jobs, really comes the need for reskilling and upskilling workers, right? Workers from traditional manufacturing industries will need to transition into these green jobs. And so it really requires a significant investment in training and education. And unions are playing a pivotal role in that by ensuring that workers have access to these opportunities. You know, we are well equipped to train the workforce of the future, as we have so many, so many programs already in place to train the workers. It's just new technologies. It's not an entirely new sector. So we just are adding to our existing apprenticeship programs and bringing in some of these green skills for people to be learning. And, you know, although it often requires specialized skills, the demand for those skills could create, right, these better paying jobs, and we're ensuring these strong labor protections. And I feel like a broken record as I keep hearing myself say this, but I think it's so important that as we are lifting this new economy, we're really focused on the workers and the impact that this new economy can have to provide job security you know, and to really focus on the long-term sustainability goals. So for us, protecting workers while building a more inclusive workforce is a critical goal, especially in sectors like manufacturing, where change is happening rapidly due to automation, green technologies, and evolving labor demands. So achieving this goal is a multifaceted approach that prioritizes workers' rights, inclusion, and equity while ensuring long-term growth and sustainability of these industries for our regions and for our communities to thrive for a long time to come. So building this inclusive green-collar workforce requires intentional efforts across multiple dimensions, from equitable access to training, strong labor protections, fair wages, safe working conditions, and really by prioritizing these principles and engaging in these collaborative efforts between unions and faith leaders and students and elected officials and community members, it is possible to create a workforce that is not only inclusive, but also resilient and equitable and empowered, and creating a quality of life for the people in the Appalachian region and in this ever evolving economic landscape.
Thank you so much, Angela. We're so appreciative of your thoughts and centering the labor perspective. And now we'll hear from Jacob Hanna. Jacob.
Thanks all. Okay, I have 44 minutes and 5 slides. So ladies and gentlemen, others, please fasten your seatbelts. We're going to go right through this. I'm going to share my screen really quickly and give me a thumbs up if you see it okay. Thumbs up? All right.
That's good.
Okay, I'm with Coalfield Development. I'll talk more about what that means. This is Appalachia. I'm from the part where we flatten the A, Appalachia. That's Mingo County where I was born. This is a map that shows all the abandoned mine lands in Appalachia. A lot of work that needs to be done there. This is a map that shows all the economic dilapidation in Appalachia. A lot of work that needs to be done there. This is a map that shows the health disparities in Appalachia. We live about 20 years shorter than folks around us. So people, place, prosperity, it needs work, it needs focus. How do we combine those ingredients to make solutions? That's what we do with our theory of change. I'll talk about more what that means soon, but it's basically the idea is if you want to reach systematic change at the top of that pyramid, you got to start from the bottom, work with communities, build their capacity, work alongside, hire folks local, make good jobs, create a new system. So what does that look like when we work with people? We have a workforce development program, partner with the Carpenters Union, IBEW, others to remove barriers from employment, help folks get their driver's license back, pay them on the job training, enroll them in the higher education that we pay for as well, and offer certifications in the following categories that you see here. Very hands-on and tactile and transferable to multiple different sectors. And then also soft skills that we train folks in as well to sort of navigate the different challenges of life in Appalachia. GED is a big goal for a lot of our trainees so that they can get into higher ed. Those folks then transform the places that we work in. And so this is from the NASA database. This is the Hobet mine site. It's a mountaintop removal coal mining site. And this is Stephen Spry, former coal miner, one of our folks who's been through our workforce training program. He's now a crew chief, gone through all the barriers you've heard me mention, all the trainings you've heard me mention, and is reclaiming that site through a myriad of different practices. Seppi rock crushers that's now making way for rotational grazing, animal harvesting, lavender, local produce, tourism, solar, etc. And then also about every coal mine has a abandoned community or dilapidated community next to it. This is the old factory. This is where I'm sitting at right now. I would like you to meet Ashley Kane. She's one of our trainees that's been through our program, now a crew chief, and has helped restore that building to a fully functioning workforce development hub. And so it's really people that are transforming places. And now those places will generate prosperity in communities. And so we have a lot of new programs, new enterprises, new nonprofits, businesses that want to do good with communities and do well by doing good. And so we've incubated a lot of that to create some of these impacts that you see here. About 800 new jobs created, $160 million in new investment leveraged, a lot of square feet redeveloped, a lot of people trained. I saw some folks in the chat, some international friends. We work a lot with European Union and coal communities in transition, trying to spread this model and spread the gospel a bit. and trying to help folks with this bottom-up approach, because that's going to be what it takes. We can't just sort of cross our fingers and hope and wait for something good to happen. We have to make our own change happen. It's great impacts. We're one nonprofit. We can't do it all on our own. And so we are building a coalition called the Act Now Coalition, Appalachian Climate Technologies Coalition. We've been around for about 2 years now. Some of the partners you see listed there at the bottom include the 2 major cities in West Virginia, 2 major universities, unions, nonprofits, for-profits, counties, et cetera, to be this patchwork quilt to simulate capacity to pull down these bigger grants. We were able to pull down a Build Back Better grant, about $62 million in federal funds, another 20-some million in private match to do the 8 following projects, which I'm going to just give you even more whiplash on. One project is in community revitalization, another is in workforce development, another is in reclamation, renewables, revitalization of brownfield factories to become clean manufacturers, green energy manufacturing factories. That's the word I was making there. And then Huntington, West Virginia, similar approach there, similar approach in Logan, similar approach here next door to make a solar hub. And so we're 2 years into that 4-year grant. A lot of great momentum happening, a lot of great jobs happening. It is a grant. You know, they come and they go. And so how can we continue to use it to leverage momentum for more and more opportunities in the next 4 years? It's a different landscape, different challenges, different opportunities. Fortunately, we've been able to use that original EDA grant to have a ripple effect of another $129 million grant for solar on top of coal mines in Nicholas County. And we use that to help the state leverage a Solar for All grant that we're going to be working with workforce development components on. And then leverage a $500 million grant that you heard earlier about the Green Bank for rural America. And then these are just some of the informational graphics on what those will entail, but these are basically grants that are now secured. They're not going to be clawed back or at danger for being reallocated, at least from what we've heard and what we've assessed with our representatives. These are resources that are moving forward for the next 4 to 6 years to help continue to create jobs, impact, and renewable opportunities in the region, and not just our region, but rural America for the Green Bank scope of work as well. There's a lot of webinars on that if you're curious about what that entails. And how does this all sort of culminate with the policy overlaps of the next 4 years? So for our coalition and our network, there's going to be still an emphasis around manufacturing. Form Energy and Nucor are 2 large manufacturing entities that have moved to West Virginia, and they're focused on localizing energy production at their sites because they consume a lot of energy, and they're focused on workforce development because they need to hire a lot of folks and train a lot of folks. And there's going to be a focus on energy efficiency, grid resilience, disaster mitigation, economic development, and housing. These are through lines that, despite a lot of different political backgrounds or perspectives, are going to stay pretty consistent that we believe over the next 4 years, and that a lot of this work still centers around communities and people. And so with that, some strategies that could complement that is what we believe is narrative building. We're going to really try and lean into a bit more. Our language can be a bigger tent without losing its focus. You know, I come from 3 generations of coal miners. And so I grew up thinking every panel installed was a coal miner job lost when my dad lost his job in the mines. But we can redefine that narrative and make sure we're being clear on what we're describing and what we're welcoming into Appalachia, that this is an opportunity for everyone. It's not to exclude others, but it can pull up others alongside us. And so we need to really get better at building that narrative. So that's going to be a priority for a strategy for the next 4 years, and depend a little less on policies. You know, just to be frank, you know, I have spent some time in DC talking with some of our representatives, and things like IRA are going to be under scrutiny and consideration for reallocation. And so how do we become less dependent in general on those policies and more dependent on collaboration with communities and advocate for these programs that are awarding federal funds to our communities? And that comes through good narrative building, comes through good narrative strategies. And then also, how do we pull more into the private sector in this work? You know, in West Virginia, we saw about $4.6 billion in new investments from the federal side, but about $11 billion in new investments from the private sector side of the last 4 years. And so it's a big player. What does it look like for us to work together? I think we're seeing that right now in our Act Now coalition with that myriad of different organizations. But it's something we want to figure out what good looks like together. And we believe there's a good strategy moving forward, as long as it keeps it centered to that delta that I showed you at the beginning. Working with communities, empowering people, employing folks in good jobs that lead to the culmination of good projects. I don't know if I fit in my time there, but hopefully I did, and I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob. That was fantastic. A quick reminder, just if you have questions for the panel, please add them to the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And we'll try to go through as many as we can. And for our final panelist today, we'll hear from Camilla Taylor. Camilla, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a pleasure to be here. I am the executive director of the American Sustainable Business Network. We are the voice of sustainable business in policy and regulation, and we do that through two ways. Through curating and building our network of sustainable businesses, educating them, activating them, focusing on collective action, and through direct policy work ourselves that we do. And I have the pleasure of giving you guys kind of the national overview of what's going on, what we can expect, and hopefully give you some guidance on, for those that are feeling incredibly disenfranchised and confused, some recommendations that we have. It's messy. It's going to be a wild 4 years, my friends. That kind of goes without saying. We have, over the last couple weeks in particular, there are a few trends and patterns that we see. I think everyone should be aware of as they plan. What am I going to do in the next few years? How do I advocate? Where do I look? So a few things that we know. Appointees are coming in. We've been seeing them. Just yesterday, the number 2 at the EPA was announced. They are, by and large, people who do not align with the sustainable agenda. I'd say that there is a very clear profile of these individuals. And for people that work in regenerative economics, not the best. They're unfortunately mostly people we're aware of, but not for good reasons. We're also seeing a huge wave of longstanding federal employees leaving and resigning. And so these are really the backbone of the government. These are the people that transition from one administration to the other. These are the people that hold institutional knowledge, processes, and who are working the day-to-day on this. A lot of them are resigning. They went through this administration the first time, and they've just thrown up their hands and say they can't do it again. So that's on a bit of the bleak side. On the good side, what we also can say and have enough data to confirm is this is a very fickle administration. There is not a long attention span. That there's a lot of movement that happens. And what does that mean? There's going to be a lot of noise coming at everyone daily. I don't know if you guys know we're buying Greenland. That was very exciting for those who like to vacation in colder places. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that. And so the role of anyone who works in sustainability, anyone advocating for sustainability, we're all going to take on a new identity as common sense, as calm, and staying focused on what actions we're seeing that can actually be implemented versus when we hear these announcements that are coming through and you stop and say, oh, wait, the executive office can't do that. Okay, stay focused. This is going to be a huge exercise in focus and calm that we're going through. And so as a whole, we expect on the national level and on the Hill, as it relates to sustainability, we're going to be fighting. We're going to be doing a lot of defense of legal entities that reward sustainable business. We're going to be fighting a lot of policy that doesn't make sense, that doesn't promote shareholder value, that doesn't promote our environment. And so it's going to be a fight. I predict a lot of this will be happening in the courtrooms, is because of the trifecta that it will be existing. A lot of things will get pushed through, and then it will be fighting the implications. For American Sustainable Business, we look at the impact on businesses, right? We look at everything that's going through and how that impacts the health of the economy. and holding the government accountable for those impacts. What we also know we're going to see a lot is green hushing. Normally, for decades, we've been talking about greenwashing. That is very quickly going out of fashion. What is coming into fashion is green hushing, which is equally as dangerous and detrimental to all of our work. But what we're going to be seeing is a lot of companies, and I speak with CEOs of Fortune 500s daily, they're doubling down on their work. They're investing, they're moving forward with their sustainability initiatives, but they're going to stop talking about it. They feel that there's a huge danger that's coming up with having this identity on that type of scale. So we're going to see these big leaders suddenly going very quiet. And what that means for smaller businesses who use a lot of the initiatives and trends of larger businesses, they're going to feel a little bit lost. And there's going to be this implied assumption of people aren't doing stuff, but that's not going to be the case. People are still going to continue to do things. Investors are investing in sustainability. Portfolios are not changing. They're just not going to talk about it. So from a local, from a national level, it's going to look really different than what we're used to seeing. And that's where you're going to go fight. That's where, if you are mad and angry about what's happening, you join collective action and you jump in the ring there. Now, what we're going to see on the local level will be a lot different. We fully expect to see growth there. If you still want to build, if you still want to move the needle forward, look locally and regionally. That's where things are a bit quieter and a bit calmer. And things will be interesting. We're already seeing at American Sustainable Business Network, we have a wealth of state affiliates who represent their states. We meet monthly, and everyone shares best practices, what's working. And so you do have these states that are more amenable to sustainability and see it as a larger priority. And they're still moving that needle. California is still requiring intense reporting, which is great. And we're able to create systems where people can share, okay, what worked for you? Okay, you tried to block this, that didn't work. Why? How can we do better? So if you want to continue and grow, look locally. That's where exciting stuff is going to happen. I would predict in the next couple of years, states will take on, in the vein of sustainability, much more of almost an incubator setting. And organizations like myself and others will be looking to how can we scale this so that when we do have an administration that's a little bit easier to work with, how can we replicate and scale some of this stuff happening on the local level? So really capturing those stories is going to be, and capturing those successes will become a really important part of the work. The other thing that gives me hope, other than the local level, is what drives sustainability in business. So in America, the regulations, while it's a carrot and stick kind of structure that we have set up, that's never been the real driver of why businesses move forward with sustainability initiatives. It's been their identity, their consumer demand. Consumers want sustainable stuff. They want transparent supply chains. They want to work and give money to companies that are aligning with their personal values. We're seeing it more and more. So it's consumers, and then you also have talent acquisition and retention. People want to work for businesses. You're there for 8 hours a day. You want to work for a place that you believe in, and we're seeing that more and more. And we expect that to continue. So if you are working for a company and they're really starting to question, how do we move forward? Do we double down on sustainability? Where do we invest? Where are we making CapEx investments? get the data on your consumers and on your end users. And I promise you it's hopeful in there. Like you will find good stuff. So the regulatory environment has very rarely been the driver for innovation in there. And so just keep chanting that motto to yourself. That's what I do anyways. And finally, because we're going to have green hushing, because collective action versus individual action is going to become paramount, because the fights we're going to be fighting are huge, and we need volume and we need voices. Find networks, find places that you trust, that have similar like-minded businesses, organizations that you can share your successes about, that you can go over what new things are happening, that you can make sense of the noise. ASBM, we're just one of them. Find a place that has policy leads that actually can tell you what not to worry about. We're not going to buy Greenland. And what to worry about, because there is some serious stuff that we should be worrying about, and can help kind of navigate that world for you. These networks are going to become exponentially more important for amplifying your own voice, but just make it feel a little less scary in the next 4 years, and like there is a path forward. And now I will pass it back to you, Joanne.
Thank you so much, Camilla, and thanks to all of our panelists for your excellent presentations and thoughts. We do have some questions in the chat, so we'll move into our question and answer session. And for those of you who've been listening, please feel free to continue sharing any questions that you might have. And again, we'll try to get to as many as possible. So the first question is, in the chat, we've seen a lot of energy for ensuring that Appalachia is at the forefront of new technologies and continues to be part of the cutting edge clean energy future. So what are some areas for growth that you're excited about, even in a new federal administration? And how can we continue to attract cutting edge industries to support that transformation in a way that also supports our environmental justice communities, our business environment, and our labor and workforce? So for that, maybe I'll start with Angela. If you want to just talk about kind of some of the trends you're seeing in making sure that we're prioritizing the opportunity to take advantage of new technologies and also support our workforce.
Well, for us here in Pennsylvania, I mean, we're really trying to follow the money, and I think Camilla said, like, stay out of the noise, like also stay out of the noise. Stay focused on what is already in sort of the hopper, what can we capitalize on, and then how can we essentially effectuate policy here in the state to attract some of these new businesses into Pennsylvania, and specifically into like our southwest region of the state, and really also then building up with the communities in the southwestern part of the state to help explain how all of this policy works, how all of these investments work, and helping people understand, like, this is how things move into these regions. And so, we're on the side of it. We've created an organization within our movement called Union Energy, which is building sort of these alliances and networks to ensure that what is coming and what is already been invested in, we're sort of at the table in those conversations to ensure that what the jobs that are being created are going to have labor standards around them, and those workers will be lifted up and those communities will be lifted up appropriately.
Thank you. Any other panelists, would you like to address this question of how Appalachia stays at the forefront of new technologies?
I might just give a little thought there. As we experience in Appalachia more disasters like what we've seen recently in North Carolina and elsewhere, I think it's going to stay in the forefront of conversation and policy. And I think it's going to shape how we talk about opportunities. I think, we're going to hear less. I agree a little bit with sort of like the green hushing. I think it might be a right sizing of the conversation, though, to maybe make the conversation more accessible to folks who may not normally be used to talking about renewables and maybe more familiar with talking about it in a way that's disaster preparedness. And so how can we help communities be at the forefront of these conversations and also empower them with the resources and tools to mitigate situations like this happening again, and do it through a way that's workforce development, through manufacturing, training, union engagement, et cetera. So I think there's an opportunity, as scary as the world that we live in is now, with all the challenges and disasters that we have. I think it's been tough to get attention to this topic when we talk about sort of the ice caps that are outside of our vision or peripheral. But when you have a river that's 8 times the size that it should be in your front yard, okay, that is a wake-up call. And so I think for better or worse, it's going to be a part of our dialogue in Appalachia. And so it's up to us to figure out how we couch that conversation in a way that isn't proselytized or politicized, but people-centered.
I could add a couple of things. So I would say everything that Angela and Jacob shared, incredibly important and right on point. So I've worked on Capitol Hill, been an advisor to a couple of different White Houses. And the things that I see that they find a lot of value in is one, if you have strong networks, I really appreciate what Jacob is doing, pulling a whole bunch of different folks together, Reimagine also as well. And you gotta have also, so what are your priorities? And figuring out how those are going to mesh with the individuals that you're having the conversations with. The other thing that we don't talk enough about is creators and how we have to play a stronger role with them around narrative and storytelling. Because the more folks see us, the more folks hear about not just the impact side, which is incredibly important, but also how we are navigating and making change happen. It also helps us in those conversations, especially today. If it was 15 years ago, it would be a different story. So those are a couple of the other additional things that are incredibly important. And then I believe Angela had also talked about making sure that you're educating individuals. And of course, someone like myself coming out of grassroots movements, it's incredibly important to make sure that we have that strong base there, so that when folks are advocating, sharing their stories, then it's much more authentic, and we help folks understand how to do that in a way that helps to move the needle.
Great, thank you. Camilla, I'd love to welcome you to share any thoughts that you might have about where the business community can influence these emerging opportunities in clean tech and cutting edge technologies.
Yeah, I think going as everyone said, going back to what Angela said, it's about where the money is. I also find workforce to be because of COVID and people working remotely, we're seeing particularly young people, but by young I mean millennials. Well, I'd like to think millennials as young, that are what is motivating where they're living when they're able to work remotely is quality of life and housing prices. But what you end up with, and what we're already starting to receive the data back for, is you then have these people that are incredibly skilled, particularly in tech, that are in places that don't have existing hubs. And how can you activate that? How can you kind of use this new influx and this new population dynamic as the driver to have them opening up businesses, have them replicating, working where they used to work in Silicon Valley or where they worked in the energy hub in Texas? How can you move that over to where they're choosing to live? And that is just being a fascinating driver of kind of shifts, especially of these newer technologies, because the workforce is going to new places. And if you can find a way to attract the workforce, then you can start to see more innovation in those areas coming from it. So just a different way of thinking about it, a different driver.
Thank you. We have some great questions, which is fantastic. So we'll try to get to as many as we can, but I'd love to follow up on this discussion with a question that seems to be kind of a natural follow-on, which is that many communities feel like they have a chicken and egg problem when it comes to attracting new businesses and developing a workforce, and that it's difficult to attract new businesses if you don't already have the skilled workforce, but it's also difficult to like skill up your workforce in the expectation that you'll attract new businesses when there's not always a guarantee that that's going to come to fruition. So in your respective work, how do you all think about that challenge? And have you seen any success stories for how we can address simultaneously attracting the businesses we need and getting the skills in our workforce to the point that they can meet that need in the private sector?
I was typing an answer to this, so I'll jump in if that's okay. I think for us, it's a great question. For us, the trick is to redefine attracting new business. For us, at least our approach, our goal isn't to create an atmosphere that attracts, a new Amazon headquarters or Walmart. Our focus is to attract the entrepreneur down the street that may not set up their business because that they don't know where to start and they couldn't hire local. If I do attract a business, an Amazon, all it's going to do is if they can't hire local, they'll bring folks from outside the state and displace the local folks. So you have to start local, whatever your approach is, whether it's a business incubation, workforce development, project development, et cetera. So if we can, when we define workforce development, we define attracting businesses, it should have a within a 50-mile radius parameter, if possible, to where you're doing workforce development to not only help someone know how to navigate the workforce, but also have the tools to deploy their vision for entrepreneurship, for economic development. A lot of our trainees, once they go through our employment process, they're exposed to the whole litany of entrepreneurship models and economic development models, to where some of them are starting their own businesses, some of them are starting their own enterprises together. And so I think that approach is key. It's really slow and it's really patient, and it's not scale. So it's not going to be 800 jobs all at once. But in a definition of sustainability, I think those jobs are big and they can come quickly and they can go quickly. I'd prefer to have something that takes its time and digs the roots deeper, and then could make an atmosphere for a larger company to come in or a larger business to come in. But I default a lot to local.
I will add, this is also a long game, unfortunately, but current talent acquisition practices are archaic at best. I mean, they don't benefit the business. They don't acquire adequate candidates. People that went to fancy universities or have things on the resume that cost a lot of money are often prioritized because it signals to an HR department that this person's great. There is so much going out about talent acquisition currently, and to do skills focused acquisition versus your resume focused acquisition. And I think something that, once again, it's a long game, but something that people on this call can do is, if you are nurturing innovation and developing business communities, make these new ways of talent acquisition, make them known and common. Build a toolkit that you can give out. If you need project management, you don't need to go to IT. Someone who's worked at McDonald's, that has worked a factory job, the basics of project management, they have. You just need to ask them in the right way, and they'd probably be fantastic at it. I think all businesses should also be budgeting professional development. That should be required and should be incentivized also by the public entities we have. But I would encourage, first, any business, if you really want to bolster an entrepreneur, small business, under 5 employees, if you want to add to the community, look at your talent acquisition practices, because I bet the people in the local community, you have what you need there. You just need to be asking it correctly.
If I could build on what Camilla just shared, because I think that's incredibly important. What Jacob shared and others equally so. But there are all these amazing examples that are out there that get very little attention of folks who are nurturing homegrown talent. Because I believe homegrown talent helps us to address the wealth gap that exists in many of our communities. It also builds roots. And as Jacob said, sometimes these larger entities come in, they don't really have roots inside of our community. So as quickly as they come, they can go. So you look at work that like Harold Mitchell has done down at the Regenesis Institute there in South Carolina, or the work of Reverend Leo Woodbury, how they are actually helping to, make sure that the talent that exists in their area is given an opportunity to find fertile ground and to grow. Or the work of Donnell Wilkins over the Green Door Initiative, or I can list out probably 75 examples of how folks are building business through worker training programs, but not just stopping at worker training programs, but helping their people to also understand you should be thinking through an entrepreneurial lens. And through that entrepreneurial lens, you should be thinking about how you are creating your own entity, and then how we can work together to continue to exponentially grow that out. So I think that, there are a number of ways of approaching what talent looks like, where talent is, and how we nurture it.
Thank you all so much. We're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about kind of what's going to be required of all of us to ensure continued success. So we had a question in the chat and really framed around working with a new administration in a way that's going to require both telling the success stories and elevating the benefits of sustainability and a clean economy, but also recognizing that there are going to be challenges that come up that we need to organize against and take more of a defensive posture toward. So how can we think about organizing better to best balance and navigate the needs, both to tell the success stories, keep the positive narrative going, and also adequately defend against potential areas of challenge or defense?
I'll go first. So this is sort of our bag, right? In the labor movement, like we organize. And this space for us, at least here in Pennsylvania, is a new space for us to be in so deeply. I think that a lot of the work that was done by labor in these spaces in Pennsylvania has been really surface level. And 2 years ago, when we decided to work with Climate Jobs National Resource Center and Cornell and the state Fed and the state building trades team together to create this organization, it was because we knew that we have to be part of this conversation. We knew that there's all of these different organizations that are doing all of this great work, and yet somehow we're not making strides. We're not making progress. We can't get policy through. We're like fighting with each other over the same thing, and we're almost on the same page. So we set out to do this, and we put a focus on understanding. We put a focus on, how do we build bridges between what was once, had a wedge between it, right? Like environmental groups and labor. If you told me 2 years ago that I would be sitting here on a group talking about green, clean energy, green, clean manufacturing, it would not have happened. It took a lot of conversation. It took a lot of understanding. And so how will we combat that? I explain all of that because none of this is easy. Organizing is never easy. People look at organizing and they think it's some sort of sprint, and it's not. It's a marathon. And so it's really with a strong determination and focus and persistence, and us saying, like, we are going to do this. We can do this. We are going to do it, and we're going to work together to do it. And the way to win, Joanne, to sort of get my point around to your question, is we have to be together. It has to be faith institutions. It has to be community leaders. It has to be elected officials, environmental groups. It has to be Philip. I can't say that. I was trying to say. I'm going to let that one go. You know what I'm trying to say, but So we all have to be together. We have to lay out an agenda that we want to fight for together. And even though we don't always agree on everything, we have to find common ground on what we do, because that's where we're going to be able to have an impact. That's where we'll be able to combat the attacks that will come against this. And it is hard to imagine, and it is hard to sort of think, if you're alone doing it, how you win. But if you think about all of the people, there's 200 and some people on this call, right? Like all of the people on this call and their organizations, and being at a table together and then going up against it, you really can start thinking there is a path forward. And I think Jacob said it in the chat earlier. There will be challenges, but it is doable. And so staying focused, staying united, there is strength in numbers, solidarity matters, all cliche things to say, but we believe them and we mean them. And, we're happy to be part of this conversation and happy to be part of this fight to really sort of reimagine this world in the future and this new economy. So
I would add to that language. Language is so important. Instead of saying we're fighting chemicals and cost-saving resources that go into manufacturing, no, we're advocating for childhood cancer prevention. You have to speak bipartisan. For people like me, that can be very difficult, but you have to speak the end result that's tangible and common sense. You can't use multisyllabic words. We can't regenerative versus sustainable versus that doesn't matter anymore. That can't matter anymore. The language has to be thoughtful and it has to be accessible, and we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. That's the one. Success is going to look a lot different in the next 4 years than it has previously. And we need to be working together. And that does mean sometimes compromising in ways that, especially those of us who are mission driven, aren't usually very comfortable with. But we need to be able to say, okay, this is going to move the needle, or this is going to stop the needle from moving backwards. That's good enough. For right now, that's good enough. So speaking in a way that doesn't isolate and being willing to work together in a large group, which is hard.
I mean, we're honoring Dr. King. So Dr. King, often talked about having a multi-ethnic movement, a multi-racial movement, all these multi-parts, but everyone being able to come together. So there's a blueprint that's out there of how to make sure that you are pulling people together, honoring their voices, letting them know, that we have a similar set of issues that we have to move forward on. And so sometimes we think we have to reinvent. That doesn't mean that we don't bring some new innovative things in, because certain technologies and other things that folks might use today. But, I had another mentor who used to say, put it where the goats can get it. What he meant by that is that we have to keep things simplified, even though we may be dealing with complex issues. And sometimes we forget that as we get further and further away from where we come from, and who we say that we advocate for. So making sure the voices of communities is the driver. For years and years and years now, I've been talking about moving people from surviving to thriving. So all the things that Camilla just talked about fall underneath of that umbrella. But if you have conversations with folks, I've worked in over 1,000 communities now, the majority inside of our country, and you ask people if they're thriving, most folks are going to say no. Most folks feel that they're just barely keeping their head above water. And what are the things that we need to do together to be able to change that dynamic? And unfortunately, many of the conversations that happen in Washington, D.C. are not operating from that paradigm, because people have many of their own personal things that they're trying to get achieved instead of what's going on in everyday people's lives and in their communities. So if we follow some of the blueprints that have been set out before and then add whatever additional flavor we need for this moment, then I think that we'll be moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
And let me just add one other thing, because I'm sorry, it's on my heart, and I promise I'll be very, very short. I know that folks are nervous in this moment. I totally get that. I know that there are folks who feel that there's some insurmountable challenges that are in front of us. But I would ask you to take a look back to the civil rights movement, to the Chicano movement, to the AIM movement, all these different movements where folks, you know, had these extreme challenges that were before them, where there was violence that was placed on them, even though they were advocating and continued to march forward on because they had a plan. They made sure that everybody understood what the plan was and there was agreement in that moment, and that we're not going to turn back. So if we understand and we help to create that commonality, and then remember those lessons from elders who have been down these roads, sometimes even in much more dangerous situations, it helps us to have a better perspective about what we can accomplish together.
Thank you. So we have some fantastic questions, which is wonderful. And I want to move us into a question around the tension between local immediate term needs and efforts and the kind of national, global, long-term trends and opportunities that are likely to emerge, especially in consideration of the change in administration at the federal level. So a question for the panelists: are you feeling a tension between local near-term needs and national and global trends? And if you are, how can we make sure that the complexities and unique needs of our region are not forgotten as the national conversation moves forward?
I'll speak a bit about kind of the tension that exists and that is growing on the globe. I'm not going to talk national, I'm going to talk global for a moment, and the local level. Fun fact, no one's surprised by this. America has never been the leader in sustainability. Shocking, I know. Now America's outsized impact has put America in a leading position in how we work with sustainability. What we can move is ginormous. In Europe, we have CSRD. There are so many, which is also imperfect, but not the discussion for now. Any multinational is required to meet the lowest common denominator, which is not the American standards, it's European standards that exist. So from a reporting, financial sustainable reporting metric, that is going to continue. And that's actually a fascinating conversation that multinationals are having, is how do we shush what we're doing over here, but at the same time transparently report, because we're legally required to, over there? How do we move talent that are used to a European standard of work-life balance over to the US? It's a really, really interesting conversation that's going on. And I think if I was a local leader looking and really engaged with the local level, I would keep an eye on Europe. Europe's also moving to the right, but that means something very different over there, because that's a lot of companies are beholden to that. And companies whose growth strategies are to eventually go global are going to have to be beholden to that as well. So I would recommend to any local follower, just keep an eye over there. Keep an eye on what's going on, because it is a huge pressure in the private sector.
I think that's all. I'm sorry, Jacob, were you going to go?
Go for it.
I think there's also a part of this that really goes back to this whole fact of understanding, right? And so I think you have to stay in tune with things and you have to separate things. And so you set your priority, you can't do everything at once. And so I think that you have to identify, what is the priority going to be? How are we going to approach this work? And what is the long-term outcome we're looking for? And then, if you do that, then you're able to sort of layer priorities. And so this is going to be our top local priority. This is what we want to focus on and build out. And then, maybe nationally or globally, we're looking at this and want to push for this. that's a bigger conversation. It's a different conversation. So just sort of having that ability to separate and stay focused, I think is important. And really, again, understanding the needs locally. I see a lot of talk in here about like the internet, and we have, in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of rural areas, right? In the Appalachian region is a lot of that. And we have local governments that don't want high-speed internet brought into their communities, even though we've had these pushes at the state level to, spread high-speed internet across. And surprisingly, they're effective in having the people who live in those towns be on the same page with them and say, we don't need this. We don't want this. It is something that we, so again, it goes back to sort of this thought of education. How can we show people that like these technologies can help them and the benefits that would come from bringing these technologies in? And so it is, it's like a big onion, and the more you peel it back, the sort of more the work grows. But I think that the bottom line is really having that focus and having those priorities and staying on track.
I think that's really, really well said. I'll echo that, and I'll just say too, to answer the sort of original question, is there tension, local, national, etc.? Yes, there is, but I think throughout all those layers, there's a through line that we can all agree upon, that folks are hurting economically, folks want good opportunities, folks want a good quality of life. And how can we center the dialogue to that? And then the outcomes of that can be the things that we all are passionate about and all advocate for. But, if I'm going to chat with my neighbor coal miner down the road, I'm going to talk about how solar can save him $80 on his electric bill that's gone up 150% over the last 15 years through AEP. Or how, a battery backup storage on that array can keep his lights on, as we have the highest rate of power blackout outages than any other state around us. And we're 81% reliant on coal as an energy source. Talk about the things that make sense day to day. What's going to impact your wallet, what's going to impact your quality of life, what's going to impact a job. That Solar Hauler is our solar company that's right next door to me. I see the trucks next door. They're unionized through IBEW, pay a great wage, and is local. It's local labor. So making sure that this has been a needed wake up call, that we've not. I almost feel like inauthentic saying, all right, we need to take the conversation back to this level. That's where it should have been the whole time. This is where the conversation should have been the whole time, and we've dropped the ball on that, and that's fine, but we need to pick it up and walk with it and take the time to build relationships and not just try and reach an outcome, but reach minds as well.
Thank you so much. We are just about at our time, so I would love to invite all the participants to join me in giving a really warm thank you to our panel. You're all fantastic, and I'm looking forward to continuing to hear what you all have to say in the breakout sessions that we have. So in the chat, Molly posted a link to the different breakout sessions, which will be taking place throughout the afternoon. And again, just big thanks to the panel. It's been an honor to facilitate this conversation, and I look forward to all the work that you'll all continue to do throughout this year and through the Reimagine umbrella and platform. This is such a wonderful way to kick off 2025. So thank you so much. And Dana, I'll pass things back to you.
Thank you.